It's time to take your seat in the front row with Mike Vaccaro. Here's your host, Mike Vaccaro.
And thank you, Chuck Denson, the voice you hear at the beginning of each of our podcasts. Mike Vaccaro here it is in the front row. And behind the scenes, as always, JR Quitman, our creator, producer, and director of the show. And we remind you, we are a CLNS Media Network podcast. Well, we're up to episode 53 of our podcast, and for that, we're sticking with the NFL. And one of the names I know you know, it's a wide receiver, kick returner for the NFL, Don Beebe. But you may not know his story, how he got to the NFL, some of the incredible moments he had with the Buffalo Bills, a year spent with the Carolina Panthers, and winning a Super Bowl championship with the Packers. In fact, his teams were in 6 Super Bowls. One victory for him, raising that trophy, the Lombardi Trophy for him. So he shares that story with us. Again, how he got to the NFL, his journey through the NFL, and what he's doing now, first as a high school coach, now as a college coach. So much great stuff to get to here, inspirational stuff as well. It is Don Beebe, former wide receiver and kick returner for the NFL, in episode 53 of In the Front Row. Well, Don, first of all, we appreciate you spending a little time with us now, a coach right now, but we're going to dive into your playing days. How's it going coaching-wise, and what's going on right now on the college coaching level for you?
Well, we're obviously heavy into recruiting right now. Our season ended in the middle of December, and as soon as the season's over, you're on the bus ride home and you're recruiting. It goes that quick, and that will go all the way. We could pick up recruits as late as June and July. So, but most of them come in, right around this time. So this is a very busy time for us recruiting.
Yeah, and recruiting is a never-ending cycle for sure.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into your playing days, and I'm sure you use that a little bit as your motivation, your recruiting pitch to where you came from as an athlete. And let's start there. You're from Illinois, grew up in Kaneville, Illinois, playing multiple sports. Tell us about those sports and how big sports were in your upbringing as a young athlete, a young person as well.
Sure. So, when I was a little kid, my mom and dad were not sports minded at all, in the sense of they didn't play any sports when they were in high school. But their kids, all 5 of us, 2 older sisters, 2 younger brothers, were all athletic kids that loved to play sports. All I remember doing was I was a basketball junkie. Matter of fact, my junior year in high school, I didn't even want to go out for football. My dad forced me. He said, either you're going out for football or you're going out for cross country. And I can't run more than 40 yards. So I'm stuck with this football thing. And thank goodness for smart dads, right? And young boys that were willing to listen. So I did. I went out my junior year football, hated it. Was forced again my senior year. And it was my senior year that I fell in love with it. But as a very young kid, I remember going 5, 6, 7 years old kid. That's all I did was play sports outside. Nowadays these kids twiddle their thumbs playing all Madden all day. All we did was play outside. And so for me, I developed these skills and love for sport. That it was my senior year that I fell in love with football because of a new high school coach that's now actually on my staff. I brought him out of retirement, Joe Thorgensen, Hall of Fame coach. And I knew I wanted to play in the National Football League at that time. I didn't tell anybody that, but I just kind of felt like it was laid on my heart. I'm a man of faith. I've known nothing but my faith throughout my whole life. And I just felt led to play this crazy game called football. And boy, the path was rocky, but amazing. And God just kept opening doors, as you'll probably hear soon.
So the sport didn't change, but as you said, the coach did as well. That's got to be something that lives with you as you're a coach now, I would think.
Yeah, that's a great comment, Mike, because it is something that has stuck with me. I've been very fortunate to have great coaches in my life: Hall of Fame high school, Hall of Fame college, Hall of Fame NFL, and Coach Levy. And if I was smart enough, it was to learn from people smarter than me. And I just took a lot of notes here and wrote them down. And so I learned how to win the right way. And I've been around just great human beings that really knew how to interact and communicate and just love their guys.
And it wasn't a direct path for you either, right? You went from high school, you were a 3-sport athlete there, and a couple of stops on the college level. Take us through your journey from college what took place before you went back to college and went to the NFL, eventually drafted by the Bills.
Yeah. So I'm going to kind of give you a Reader's Digest because it would take an hour to tell you, but I bebopped around a lot of schools. I only played 2 years of college football, one at Western Illinois, one at Chadron State, an NAI Division II school at that time. And now it's a D2 NAI or NCAA Division II. And then I was the Bills' first pick in the 1989 draft. But here's how it all happened. When I graduated from high school in 83, I went to Western Illinois the first time, and I went through a 2-week camp, lost 21 pounds. I just wasn't ready for college. I was homesick. I was girl sick. I met this girl in kindergarten that I fell in love with. We started dating junior in high school. She's now my wife of 4 kids. She's the greatest woman ever created. Thank you, Lord. And I left after the 2 weeks, went back home, enrolled in Aurora University. Ironically, here I am 40 some years later, coaching football here, but I played basketball there 1 year, and then dropped out completely. Started working construction, worked construction for 3 years. And it was May of 1986. And I felt, this presence of, that I just know is the Lord telling me to go back and play football. And I was like, how do I do that? I mean, I haven't talked to anybody in 3 years about college football. And then the doors just started opening up. The first door that I tried to walk through, because I was talked into it from construction friends of mine. You know how men work. They just start pounding nails and they think they're all talk about their glory days and how good they were. And they talked me into going trying out for the Chicago Bears in May of 1986, believe it or not. Now, if you remember, they just won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Okay. So here, and I grew up a Bear fan, and this is why I was talked into it. And you talk about naive. Sure. I drove up to Lake Forest from Aurora, Illinois with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, Diana. And I'm sitting up there and I'm watching Lou Barnes, Dennis McKinnon, Willie Galt, Walter Payton, Jim McMahon. And I knew who Bill Tobin was. Bill Tobin was the general manager of the Chicago Bears at that time. And he was 2 rows behind me. And I was like, wow, what an opportunity. I'll just go up and ask Bill and see if I can get a tryout. How stupid, right? So I went up there and I said, Mr. Tobin, what would it take to get a tryout with the Bears? And he didn't even look at me. He kept writing on a sheet of paper. He said, we don't take kids off the street. That's all he said. And I was like, okay, well, that was kind of strange. He didn't even look at me. But I knew at the fastest times where I knew what Willie Galt was running in the 40, but I had never been timed at this time in the 40. So I had no idea. So I just threw out a number. I said, well, what if I could run a 4.2 or 4.3? So he does look at me now. And he says, son, if you could really run that fast, you'd already be in our camp. And that was it. That was my conversation with the Chicago Bears. So I left dejected. I had no idea where I was going to turn. 1 month later, the phone rang in my house. And this is back when they had rotary phones, okay, on the wall. And I picked it up, and it was the Western Illinois coach called me back. And think about this. And there's a lot of things that I'm going to have you really ponder about because it just doesn't happen this way. Why did Western Illinois, first of all, they were mad I left. Why did they call me 1 year after? They never did. Why did they call me 2 years later? They never did. Why would they call me 3 years later? I mean, think about that. I mean, I just look at this and I said, this God's handprints all over. I'm a college coach now. I recruit. If a kid I recruited came, played for the fall camp and left, I would wish him well, but I would probably never call him again to, hey, would you come back? Especially 3 years later, I would have forgot his name, let alone recruit him. And so here I am. They call me and say, hey, would you ever come back to Western Illinois? And I said, golly, what an answer to a prayer. I would love to come back. So I did. I transferred back there from Aurora University because even though it was 3 years later. And I went through the fall camp, 1986, okay, August of 86. I went through the 2-week camp again. And then the rules and regulations guy, James McKinney, brings me into his office. He says, Don, you're 4.5 credit hours short of being a transfer student. I threw my hands up. I was like, well, why didn't we kind of figure this out beforehand, guys? I mean, I don't know the rules of the NCAA. And so I was basically had to leave the school, go back to Waubonsee Junior College, pick up 4.5 credits, but I took 12 or 15 hours, then transferred back now in the spring of 1987. And when they first called me in June of 86, they said, we'd love to have you back. But however, your clock was already started. So you only got 2 years left. Well, now that I had to go back in the fall, now I got 1 year left, okay, to play college football and a passion and dream to play in the National Football League. You talk about crazy. But that was my dream. Okay. And so I kept pursuing it and never giving up. So I got the transfer credit hours, transferred back in the spring of 87. And things were going well. I went through spring ball. I landed up getting the starting job, which is a miracle anyway, that a guy just never played it down. He's going to be the starter. But here's what's really cool is my NFL career started before I ever played a down in college football. And they're like, how's that even possible? Well, I'm going to tell you how. Is I was in math class one day and I had a tank top, jean shorts, and sandals on, usual college attire. And I'm walking down from the math class, and I always walked around Western Hall. Western Hall is where the indoor track was and the coaches' offices and everything like that. But I would always walk around the building to go back to Wetzel Hall, my dorm room, eat lunch, and then go to my next class. But this day, for whatever reason, I happened to walk into the gym. I walked into the gym. I don't remember the reason why, but I saw guys that were going to be seniors running the 40-yard dash for NFL scouts. I'm like, well, I'm going to be a senior. Okay. How come I wasn't invited? And so I went up and asked my coach. He said, well, Don, you're not on any film and they don't even know who you are and blah, blah, blah. And I said, man, coach, I would really like to run. He's like, Donnie, man, and I was like, please, coach, I would love to. I was pleading with the guy. Right. So he goes down, let me ask this Dallas scout. So he goes down there and, he's got this big shirt on with a star in his chest and stopwatches all around his neck. And you can see, 40, 50 yards away, the guy says, yeah, who cares? Let him run. So this was going to be the first time I ever ran a 40. And so the coach comes back. He said, yeah, just get in line and run. I said, coach, I got one other problem. He goes, what? I said, can I warm up? Can I go back to Wetzel Hall, get my running shoes? He goes, no, flip off your sandals, get in line, and no warm up, run.
Wow.
Okay. So I did. So I got in line, and if you could have heard me pitter-patter down the track, it was quite a scene. But I ran that thing barefooted. And when I got done, that star on the chest was on a beeline for me. And if you ever been to pro days before, those guys don't talk to really any players. They converse amongst themselves, but they really don't engage in the guys. But this guy, he wanted to know something. So he came right up to me and he says, what is your name? I go, Don Beebe. Don Beebe. What number are you on film? I said, I'm a fifth-year senior. I've never played before. He laughed at me. He goes, I've never seen that before. In 21 years I've been doing this. I've never seen this before. And he said, not only that, it's the fastest time I've ever recorded a kid. And he showed me it was a 4.32. And I looked at him and I said, is that good? And he kind of laughed. And he says, no, that's pretty good. So he said, well, we're going to keep our eye on you. And that's why I say my NFL career actually started before ever playing a down of college football. And that's the truth. And so I went on, had a good year at Western. And after that year was over, I got some form letters. You might be a free agent. There's no way you're going to get drafted. And so an agent, I didn't even know what an agent was at that time. But I had a decision to make. Was I going to try to play at an NAI level, which I had 1 or 2 years left to play at the NAI because they go by semesters, not years, or are you going to enter the draft? So I went home for Christmas break because you get about 3 weeks over Christmas break at college. I went to check out NAI schools, and I'm looking at, local schools. I'm from Aurora, and Benedictine, who's now our arch rival. Go figure, right? Benedictine was a school that really wanted me. They found out that I was interested in transferring to an NAI school. They invited me over. I talked to them. They had a quarterback that was really good as a junior, threw close to 3,000 yards. They said I was going to be the starting X receiver day one. They knew I had NFL teams already looking at me and stuff of that nature. And I was like, how good this looked from a worldly perspective. I was engaged to be married. I could have commuted out of home, saved a lot of money. God said no. And I was like, no. I was like, this is perfect, right? And I just felt uncomfortable with it. So I told them, no, I'm not going to. But I had 3 weeks left to make my decision because I had to transfer, right? So I was just praying and said, Lord, give me a quick answer here. Sure enough, a few days later, the phone rang again in the kitchen. I picked it up. And he says, this Don? And I said, yeah, this is, or actually said Donnie. And he says, hey, this is Brad Smith. I said, and now he recruited me for when he was at Western Illinois in 1983 when I was in high school. He was the original recruiter that brought me to Western first time. And this is 4 years later, almost. And he said, hey, I hear you're looking for an NAI school. I said, and I got real excited. I said, are you at one? He goes, yes, I am. I'm at Chadron State. I said, what? He goes, Chadron State. It's in Nebraska. I said, Nebraska? I'll be honest with you guys. I was just, I'm a 21-year-old kid at this time. I knew Nebraska was west. I'd never been to Iowa, let alone Nebraska. So He goes, go get your atlas. So I went out to my dad's truck, got the atlas, flipping through the atlas, go to Nebraska. I'm looking around Omaha, Lincoln, movie theaters, restaurants, people. No. The northwest corner, all the way in the other end, south of Mount Rushmore, about 2 hours south of Mount Rushmore, in the most remote area in the country. And I was like, Coach, there ain't no way I'm going there. It's 15 hours away from home. I'm engaged to be married. I can't go out there. He goes, pray about it. And I was like, oh, God. So I did. And I felt real comfortable. Why? I have no idea. I do now, but I didn't then. And so I had to try to get it out. And I said, Coach, would you come out to Chicago area, meet with my fiance, my mom and dad, and me, thinking that he wouldn't do it. He drove out. As soon as he hung up, he drove out. Okay. 15 hours. He was there the next day. We sat down, we met, and I had a lot of questions. And I said, Coach Smith, I said, I really like you. However, do you have what was your record? Are you guys any good? He goes, well, Donnie, he says, we were 1-8 last year, but it's my first year. We got some guys coming back. We'll be pretty good. Okay. Strike one. He goes, I go, do you have a quarterback? He goes, well, he graduated last year, but we got this freshman coming up from Converse, Texas. His name's Stu Perez. He was 5'7". I said, strike two. I said, I'm just going to cut through the chase. In my mind, I said, have you ever had an NFL guy come from Chadron? I mean, has there ever been an NFL guy play from Chadron? He goes, yeah, Dub Miller did in 1932. I was like, strike three. I was like, Coach, there ain't no way I'm coming out there. And sure enough, 3 days later, I made a decision to go to Chadron. Who would have thought the Mecca of the NFL, right? Wow. So I go out there, had a great year, got some form letters again. And I know I'm talking a long time, so you guys can interrupt me anytime here, but I told you it's a long story. It's a good one,
but it's a good one.
Yeah. So I get a form letters again. Hey, we like what you do. You had a great year at Chadron. It was Chadron. I mean, who's going to draft me out of Chadron, right? So then a guy by the name of Bill Giles, and Bill Giles was a combine scout. He wasn't a scout for one team specifically. He had the Midwest region, and he had to go find and help find the top 300 players in all of the country, all the D1 schools. How in the world is a guy from Chadron, Nebraska, going to get invited to the big show in Indy, right? That's impossible. I mean, think of those odds. And sure enough, he came in to his dying day. He never told me what I ran the 40 in, but he did say at the end of the workout, and he had been doing it that time, I think 30 some years. And he's not here anymore. He said, Don, this is the greatest workout I've ever put a kid through. I don't care if you're at Chadron. This is the greatest workout I've ever seen in a kid. He says, I'm going to give them my highest recommendation to get you into this combine. You need to be seen. I was like, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, sure enough, 2 weeks later, I get a form letter stating, Dear Don Beebe, you've been invited to the 1989 February combine in Indianapolis. And then it went on to list all these things. And so I got to go to the combine. And I went in there. You talk about naive. Man, oh man. I mean, I literally had a backpack, my old ASIC fishing shoes on my feet that I wore into the building, and the right sole of the one shoe was half unglued. So when I walk, it flopped. And when I ran, it really flopped. And so I remember getting to my room, and my roommate was Mike Barber from Marshall. And I get in there, we start chatting a little bit, and then the door knocks. I go over to open the door, and there's the concierge from the Crown Plaza, which is right across the street from the Hoosier Dome. And these are from Mike Barber. They're Nike shoe boxes. And I was like, okay. So I took them over to Mike, and I said, what are those? He goes, well, my agent sent me these shoes. I said, agent? I go, well, what do you mean agent? He goes, you don't have an agent? I said, no, I didn't know I needed an agent. He said, man, you might be the only dude here that doesn't even have an agent. I was like, okay, well, that doesn't solve me any issues. I said, what are those? He goes, I'm going to run these in the 40 tomorrow. And he pulled them out, and there's these lime green, track shoes, and they were size 12. He says, well, you can have my other pair. I said, I'm a 9.5. It'd be like Bozo Circus running around these things, right? So I chose to, I was going to rip the sole off, or I was going to try to find a rubber band, or I was going to try to find some glue. I couldn't find any of it. So I ran in a flopping fishing shoe. Now, at that point in time, just so you know, I had no idea what I ran because media couldn't get in the dome. Nobody knew. Nobody would tell you what you ran, right? Well, it must have been pretty fast because when I got back to Chadron, the LA Raiders and the Green Bay Packers were literally on my doorstep, and I had to do 21 personal workouts. I mean, these guys now, they'll have one, and they're all there, right? I had to do 21 personal workouts. And years and years later, I found out what I ran. And how did that happen? I had a business called House of Speed, training athletes, blah, blah, blah. It was 2002, I believe it was. I was at the combine in Indy, watching the guys that I was training. And I'm sitting in a box with Tony Dungy and Bill Polian. Bill Polian, obviously, was the general manager of the Buffalo Bills who drafted me. And then he was a Indianapolis coach, GM, while he was sitting with Tony at that time. And he goes, Beebs, he goes, you still hold the record, right? I go, record? He goes, yeah, you and Deion ran a 4.25 in 1989. That record still holds. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I'm just finding that out now. And so I didn't realize what I ran a 4.25 in a floppy fishing shoe. And that record stood for 17 years until Chris Johnson broke it. And then now a guy by the name of Dodd, who I don't know who that is, holds a record at 4.22. Why do I say that? I say that because that had to happen. I mean, looking like me, coming from Chadron at a 5'10" guy or 5'11" guy, walking into the Crown Plaza and into the RC or Hoosier Dome, running a 4.25. I mean, think about those odds now. That's crazy. So my life changed.
And the Deion that you mentioned is Deion Sanders.
Deion Sanders.
Now it's Coach Prime, the coach of the Colorado Buffaloes. But you and Deion Sanders at the time had the fastest 40 times. So what did that do in really getting your name out there, eventually being drafted by the Buffalo Bills?
Yeah, so I mean, draft day came along, and I knew I was going to go because I had an agent now. I was going to go between the second and fourth round. That's what I was told. I wasn't nervous. I see these guys get nervous. I wasn't nervous at all. I had no expectations whatsoever. I just knew that God had a place for me. And so I sat on that couch, and then at the end of the day, the phone rang on day one, and it was Coach Levy. And he says, Don, he says, I just want you to know we just drafted you as our first pick in the third round. And my reaction was like, it was awesome. Let's get to work, and they flew me out the next day and had to do a press conference and all that. So it was like, I went from some complete unknown to a first pick, and just, if I was to look back on it now, I couldn't have picked a better place. I mean, you think about it. We had Hall of Famers James Lofton and Andre Reed, and I was the third guy really in that K-gun offense. But I could have gone somewhere else. I mean, this was back now, and you guys know the K-gun offense is really kind of the innovators of the 3 receiver set. And now it's the 3, 4, 5 receiver sets and and stuff of that nature. But I could have gone into offense that was just a 2 receiver set, which all of them were, really, except Buffalo, except on third downs. And it really was, I couldn't have picked a better place. Play with Jim Kelly and all those guys in Buffalo. We had something special, and the fans are the best fans. I mean, they're incredible people. And to see what just happened last Sunday was heartbreaking, that's for sure, because those fans deserve a Super Bowl championship, man. If anybody does, they do. And one day they'll get it. But it was a time of my life, guys, Buffalo. Those 6 years there were something special.
Yeah, you're talking about Bills Mafia, the way they support that team. And obviously you mentioned a lot of Hall of Famers there and 4 straight Super Bowl appearances. Did you guys expect to have that kind of result every year when you had all these great players at that time?
Ironically, yeah, we kind of did expect it. I mean, we had such a moxie and aura about us, very confident guys. In my own family, because I come from a big family, they were planning that trip, the Super Bowl trip, every year in like September, so it was kind of, it was fun. Gosh, it was fun. And what made it fun was Coach Levy, John Butler was the general manager initially, and then Bill Polian. Those guys made it fun. And then the fans. What I love about Buffalo fans is, as a player, a lot of times you go out and they'll want something from you. And not Buffalo. Buffalo is you go out and they give you something. They're like, they just want to be a part of the family. They want to give you whatever it is, a free meal or golf or whatever that is. I mean, they are just very genuine, blue collar, some of the nicest people in the world. And man, I'll tell you, I love Western New York. Absolutely love it. And the guys that we had were second to nobody in the history of sport.
You had to kind of compare a little bit to maybe Illinois, Nebraska, places you've been to. Obviously, Buffalo, the weather plays a role when you're outdoors playing football as well. Was that something that you enjoyed and gravitated to? Because it seems like Buffalo and their fans do.
Oh, man, I love playing in the snow. I loved playing when I was a kid. Now, however, we did have games that were 33 below. That was not fun. That wasn't fun for anybody. But, for the most of the part, I mean, that was just exceptions to the rule. But I didn't mind. My favorite temperature to play game was really about 45 to 50 because it wasn't too hot. And I was constantly running. So and in those conditions, I felt like I could run a lot faster and a lot longer because I never got tired. When it was really hot or really cold, then it becomes a little bit more taxing on the body.
4 Super Bowl appearances, unfortunately 4 losses as well. How does that sit with you? Eventually you won a championship with Green Bay, but to get there in that Super Bowl and unable to get those wins, was that a tough stretch?
I think it was tough while you're going through it. But I think we all knew that we did something historic. Even during it, we were doing something that was special. And then going to 4, I don't think we knew quite what it has become now. But we've always said that that team is going to go down in history as one of the greatest teams ever because you did something that nobody's ever done. They're going 4 in a row. It's insane. And now you look at all the guys that have gone into the Hall of Fame off that team, and the head coach and the general manager and the owner. I mean, it was a special team. And, and we had our ego guys, but I got to tell you, I deal with egos from a college perspective. And there's things of being ego, and there's ones that are just confident. And I think a lot of guys that may have been misconstrued as an ego guy really was just a confident guy. They were all team guys. We all got along really well, even though we went through a stage in '89 of the bickering Bills. Well, that was family, and there's Jim and Thurman going at it. They do that still, but they love each other. Those guys are like brothers. We're all like that. When we get together, it's like never missing a beat. And for example, when I scored a touchdown, who was usually the first one there to congratulate me? Thurman. He had no need to go over there, but he was excited for me as he was for him scoring a touchdown. Very humble guy when it came to scoring touchdowns. He just wanted to win. Same thing with all those guys, all the stars. Jim Kelly, one of the most loyal people I've ever met. And I mean it. For some of the things that he's done for me and a lot of people, most people would never do from his superstar status. One of the most loyal people you will ever meet. And I could tell you stories about stuff that he's done, but he's just they all are. We just had a lot of great guys playing on that team.
Yeah, Hall of Famers as players, it seems like as people as well, which is great to see. And again, 4 straight. The first one, I know you were injured, Super Bowl XXV, but it ends with the Scott Norwood kick wide right. Was that friendship tested at that time? Again, as you said, everybody was, loved everybody, but how do you deal with a situation like that? Not just missing a kick, but missing a kick in the Super Bowl that could have been a victory for you guys.
Yeah, I think you give a good point, and only solidifies why we were so good is because not one guy on that team had 1 second of blaming Scotty. No way. Our defense couldn't stop anybody. Our offense could have played better. There's a lot of times that you could point to any day. He just happened to be on the spotlight. But what people don't realize either, and Frank Reich was my roommate, so I got a little bit of the inside story on this. That when he was in pregame kicking the ball, he was hooking it. It was coming in like a little bit of a draw, and he hitting it good and nailing every one of them. So when he got into that moment, and when it first left his foot and it was a little to the outside, Frank even told me, he says, "Beebs, there's no doubt in my mind that was going in. He hit that exactly where he wanted to hit it, exactly how he was doing it in the pregame. For whatever reason, it didn't hook this time, but he hit a great kick, and the things that he had to experience from that." How sad. I'll be honest with you, that was really sad. Scotty Norwood is one of the nicest human beings you'll ever meet. And I can assure you, not one player said one negative thing to him. Exactly the opposite. We love that guy, and we still do. And anybody could have, made a play during the course of that game that could have changed things. So, just having to fall on Scotty at the very last second.
Yeah, lucky for him, it was a time without social media, before social media.
Yeah.
Again, another big moment. Your big moment is in the Super Bowl against Dallas, Super Bowl XXVII. You guys are losing that game. Leon Lett picks up that fumble. You track him down. Take us through that moment. Where were you when you started, and what did you think you were going to do? Because Leon Lett, 6'6", 290, 5'11", 185 for you. What did you think you were going to do if you tracked him down?
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna give you two different stories on this. The first one would be, I was running a fly pattern down the left side of the field. We're just trying to run a no huddle and score, right, and save face. And we were down 52-17, obviously, and there's 4 or 5 minutes left in the game. And I turned and I looked. So we weren't even on the camera of the Bills side view. So nobody really knows how far I was. We know it was a minimum of 30 to 35 away. So I turned and looked, and I saw automatically Frank moving up into the pocket. The ball came out really quick, and I stopped. I saw Leon pick it up, and I just started going. And I started running, and I'm running right in front of the Dallas bench, which at that time I didn't know that. I mean, those thoughts don't go through your head. What did go through my head was, how am I going to tackle this 300-pound man? I was going to literally jump on this guy's back. I was going to jump on Leon's back. He would have rolled me right through the back of the end zone. It would have became a football foul, most likely. Okay, but he put the ball out with about 8 to 9 yards to go. He put the ball out. And from then, my whole reaction, you could see it just went right to the ball. And I knocked the ball out of his hands. And I tell people that how you react to something during the course of a game truly is what your character is inside. If we had time to think about it, right? I mean, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, a day, a week, we're all going to come pretty much to the right conclusion of the right decision to make. But when you react to something, that's your true character. And I tell the guys that I coach and the guys that I've trained and been through all these years of doing that, character is always revealed in every game. Marv Levy used to say that all the time, and boy, was he right. And here's the inside story for me personally is it was when growing up in the backyard, Pasadena was my place. I wanted Fred Biletnikoff catching a pass from Kenny Stabler in the Super Bowl Pasadena, right? I mean, that was a dream.
Yeah.
And then when I became in high school and then collegiately, I wanted to play in Pasadena. And then I get in the league. So here I'm living my dream as a 10-year-old boy, right? I remember going out an hour before the game. It was a beautiful 70-degree day, Southern California, no wind, nothing. Just a perfect day. I'm wearing his gain, his pain, your gain shirt under my pads, which I always did. And I had my game pants on, my game shoes, and I went to the 50-yard line. And I knelt and took and said a prayer. And it was one of those prayers that I'll never forget. And I just said, God, let me glorify your name more than ever before, more than mine. This is all about you today. Every time I played, I said that, but this one really kind of resonated. Selfishly speaking, guys, I got up from that prayer, and I'm telling you, there was no doubt in my mind I was winning the game at the end of the game with a one-handed stab J.J. Jefferson catch to win the Super Bowl for Buffalo. That's how I felt. I mean, I felt that good. But no, God gave me Leon Lett play in a blowout. And why do I say that? Because I stand on stages and I public speak all over the country. And if I'm standing on these stages and I tell them of the story of winning the Super Bowl in the Buffalo uniform with a one-handed stab in the back of the end zone, who can relate to that? Nobody. Yeah. But how many people can relate to never giving up? Leon Lett. Everybody. And that's how God works. And so I'm honored to be that guy that made that play and used that play to glorify him and not me, and tell people and inspire people to never give up. There's always an option. There's always hope. And boy, through the whole pandemic that we just came through the last few years, man, I've seen so many kids giving up, man. It's just sad. And I just want to, if I could just give them hope, that play resonates with people. And guys, I can't tell you how many times we are 30 years later now, and we're still talking about this crazy play. But yet I'm proud of that.
Yeah, and you should be, because like you said, that's what people can relate to. But still, that being the case, did it surprise you how much notoriety that play has gotten through the years? And again, you're associated with that maybe more than anything else in your career at times.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That it ultimately surprises me big time. I mean, watch my reaction after the play. I go down, his knee goes down into my helmet, and I get up, I adjust my face mask. I'm not happy. I mean, I'm not happy. We're getting blown out. I literally never thought about what just happened from so many other people's perspective. From my perspective, I was not happy. And the first time that it actually meant something, and I was like, what? was when I got into the locker room and Ralph Wilson, the owner, came in, and he usually comes in and he talks to some guys, but I mean, he was on a beeline for me. I mean, I was sitting there, taking my shoes off, and he walked right over to me, past everybody else, went right to me. And he said, son, he didn't call me number 82 or Don or anything like that. He said, son, you showed me what Buffalo's all about. You showed everybody in America what Buffalo's all about, never giving up. And I thought to myself, well, it meant something to him, And then I was asked to go down to the media to do the media thing. I was like, man, why take Jim down there? I don't want to go down there, So I was like, yeah, I'll go down there. And it was packed. I mean, there were so many mics around my thing. I was like, why are people gathering around me? They all wanted to talk about why. Why'd you make this play? And so I just started sharing with them how I was brought up, my mom and dad, my faith. I mean, all these things. And it just was an incredible, and it has never stopped, guys. Here we are, and this is the honest truth. 30 years later, roughly, and I still get fan mail letters, either at Aurora University or at Aurora Christian, was a high school coach for so many years, or at the business, House of Speed, or at my home. Every day I'm getting at least 1 to 3 to 5 letters from somebody around the country saying they want something signed, sure, but they'll always say, gosh, what a great play. The Leon Lett play meant so much to me, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, crazy. At One Bills Drive, I used to get boxes. I mean, big boxes, hundreds and hundreds of fan mail letters every single day for months after that Super Bowl. And I kept about 20 to 30 of them, that really ones that were just heart-wrenching stories. And I'm not going to go into those, but and I still got that box of about 20 to 30 of those letters.
It's incredible. Again, one play, but such a significance and affected so many people. So again, your time there, the 4 Super Bowls, and then eventually your time ends. You spent 1 year with the Panthers. You were there with some other Bills players in the first year of the franchise. And eventually went to Green Bay. How'd you get from Carolina to Green Bay? And you stayed in the cold weather, but you stayed on a pretty good team again with the Packers.
Yeah. Well, again, it's just an amazing story here. I didn't want to leave Buffalo, but I would love to have ended in Buffalo. But they were after the 4th Super Bowl, and then we had one more year, and then we didn't even make the playoffs and such in '94. And so they were kind of dismantling the deal. And that was the year that Carolina was starting the franchise. And Marv Levy, as professionally as he brought me into his office, he says, Don, we're going to move in another direction. I shook his hand, told him I love him and everything like that. And we're still friends. He's 96 years old. We're still friends. But that's kind of a man of character that he is. So I went to Carolina because Bill Polian went down there. He took me, Frank Reich, and Pete Metzelaars down there. And I was really excited. I mean, I was so gun-ho to start a new franchise. I was the number 1 receiver going down. Frank was going to be the quarterback. We were roommates for 6 years. I'm like, this is like match made in heaven, right? What a disaster. The fan base, Carolina, were awesome. Love Carolina. Love the people down there. We still have some of our best friends that live there. Football-wise, it was a disaster. I have a high respect for Dom Capers. I think he's a great man, truly a man of character. Very professional. However, the position coaches made it very difficult on me and Frank, and I felt like I'd never played it down, and it was rough. It was really rough. And so me and Frank, being men of faith and roommates, we would just share, with each other what we're going through, and Bible scriptures, and praying for each other, and all these things. And so I had a bad attitude, and I tell guys, today, and I even raise my 4 kids this way. There's going to be times that you're not going to feel like you fit in. You're going to have self-pity and point fingers and all that stuff. You know what? Look yourself in the mirror, get yourself off the mat, and keep persevering and keep going, and let God open and close the doors. Okay. It's out of your control. So why whine and cry about it? And that's the way I've always kind of lived my life. And initially I was, not in a great place. But eventually I did during the course of the season. And I just went out and I started having great practices and stuff of that nature. Statistically, it was awful. Football wise, it was still bad. My circumstances didn't change, but I did. And because of that, where'd God take me the next year? Green Bay Packers. And God has a sense of humor. And who did we beat in the NFC championship game to go Super Bowl? The Carolina Panthers.
Yeah.
And it's funny because Bill Polian came up to me after the game because he was still with the Panthers. He says, I knew you still had it. And because I statistically really had my best year in Green Bay in '96, and was able to do some great things with that team with another Hall of Fame quarterback and Hall of Fame players, and we had a lot of the same chemistry that we had in Buffalo. Obviously, the fan bases are very similar. The Green Bay Packer fans are crazy, love them. I love going up to Wisconsin. So I was very fortunate to play on two phenomenal franchises. I couldn't have picked out two better places to play in my career.
You mentioned a lot of Marv Levy. What about Mike Holmgren? What was he like as a head coach, and what he did to help develop you, like you said, alongside Brett Favre as your quarterback?
Yeah, good question, Mike. So Marv and Mike are two completely different opposite in personalities. Okay. Mike is a very bombastic, control, wanted to call the plays person, and was always involved in every decision and everything of this nature. So I saw two different perspectives of it, and I've learned a lot from both. I will say this: Mike is the brightest offensive mind I've ever been around. I do a lot of the same things that Coach Holmgren did. He was brilliant. Now, he came from Paul Brown of the Cleveland Browns that went to Bill Walsh out to the 49ers in this West Coast offense concept. And then Mike, took it to Green Bay, and now Andy Reid and Doug and all these guys are, doing this stuff. But man, I was very fortunate to play under Coach Holmgren. My coaching styles are a real good mix. My mentality and who I am from a personal is more like Coach Levy, but my stickler to detail and offensive minded stuff comes from Coach Holmgren. And so I was very fortunate to play for two just outstanding men, outstanding coaches. My wideout coaches, good night. I had two of the greatest wideout coaches in the history of the NFL. Charlie Joyner, who played 18 years at San Diego Chargers, was my wideout coach for 4 years in Buffalo. And then I go to the Green Bay Packers, and Sherm Lewis was the wideout coach for Jerry Rice in the 49ers. And he was the offensive coordinator, but I learned a lot from Sherm in our video of running routes and the angles and all this stuff. So I was very fortunate, guys, to play for a lot of great-minded coaches.
Yeah, Super Bowl 31 victory for you guys with the Packers. You beat the Patriots. Drew Bledsoe, they had the quarterback at the time, not Tom Brady just yet. But then you went to another Super Bowl, lost to the Broncos. 6 Super Bowls overall that you played in, and won a championship in one. I mean, what does it say? Again, just getting there is so difficult. But to be a member of 6 Super Bowl teams, that's incredible, especially your backstory and where you came from.
Yeah. Yeah, I was actually the first guy in NFL history to be on 6 Super Bowl teams. Mike Lotish is the first guy to ever play in 6 Super Bowls because I was hurt. And then obviously Thomas shattered all those records. So it doesn't matter anymore. I was very blessed. I mean, guys, I played 9 years, went to 6 Super Bowls. Those percentages are crazy. Charlie Joyner played 18 years, never even sniffed in Super Bowl. Yeah. And certainly he should have, and he had one of the greats in Dan Fouts that he played with. So for me, I'm just blessed. I just want to use my platform as a former player today to pay it forward and to help kids that are struggling. I could have gone and coached in the National Football League 2005 when Marv Levy went back to be the general manager of the Buffalo Bills. He called me. And he asked me if I would go coach. I just finished my first year in high school coaching. And he asked me if I would go back and coach with him with the Buffalo Bills. And this was like, 9:30 at night. And I'll never forget the call. And I was like, Coach, man, first of all, I'm honored that you even asked me. But my heart is at Aurora Christian. I was a volunteer coach at Aurora Christian for 14 years. And never paid a dime. This is a school the first year. They had 17 kids in the whole program, freshman through senior year. They had no football field. They had no weight room. It was the Bad News Bears on steroids. And we were able to do some amazing things. We went to the quarterfinals, 7 of the 10, semifinals, 5 of the 10, going to 3 state championships, winning 2 of them with a bunch of innocent kids. Now I'm at AU, and we're doing some great things at AU, and I'm really excited about where we're coming AU. And I can honestly say this would have been my 17th year. If I would have went in 05, this would have been my 17th year probably coaching the National Football League. Who knows where that path would have went. I look at Doug Peterson because we used to talk and we were roommates when we were in Green Bay, and he was a high school coach. And I see him now, won a Super Bowl, just had another great year with the Jacksonville Jaguars. That I could have done that. Yeah, there's no question. But, that wasn't my calling. And I can honestly say I've enjoyed these last 20-some years coaching innocent kids at a really small private Christian school, and now at a Division III school at Aurora University. I am having the time of my life. I would have never wanted to change any of it. And I'm exactly where I always believe if you're right where God wants you to be, and every day is a good day. I love my life. I love my job.
Well, that's great because a lot of people can't say that. Like I said, you're right where you need to be. And for 9 years, you were where you need to be in the NFL. What a career. Again, we mentioned the Leon Lett play. You had a game with 4 touchdowns against the Steelers. Your first pass that you caught was a touchdown. You had a touchdown, the comeback win against the Oilers off from Frank Reich. And again, the Super Bowl. Is there one play? Again, we talked about the Leon Lett play. But are there other moments in your career when you sit back and even you talk to your young players now that you kind of, gloat a little bit or talk a little bit about yourself and some of the great moments you had during your time? Yeah,
I think, the most euphoric feeling that I've ever had as a player, because I've had several as a coach, as a player, most people would think, win the Super Bowl. Yeah, it was a great moment. It really was. And I'll be honest with you, my thoughts when we won the Super Bowl, when I'm standing in the field and I'm celebrating with my wife and kids and teammates, went back to Buffalo. I was like, man, why me? I felt almost guilty. I was like, why aren't all my friends from Buffalo and the fans and the, Marv and all those guys? I mean, they deserved it more than I did, right? But it was me. But the most euphoric feeling that I had that you just get emotional and you can't even control your emotions was exactly what you just said, Mike. The first pass that ever went my way. Think about this. I was, we know I was a 3rd round pick and I didn't play in the first and second games. And Jim went to Marv on Tuesday, our day off, before the 3rd game, which was going to be on a Saturday afternoon, nationally televised game in the Astrodome against the Houston Oilers, right? And he says, we drafted Beebe. He's not even playing. I want him on the field. So they cut Chris Burkett that day right there. And I became the 3rd receiver behind Andre Reed and Flip Johnson at that time. And then I was the 3rd guy. So I call my family, I'm going to play, and it's on national. I mean, this is going to be amazing. We had no idea what was going to happen. Okay. So then we get in the dome, and the first time I get in the huddle, it's a run play. Okay, no problem. So I'm running out the line of scrimmage, and Chris Dishman, who's the corner for the Houston Oilers at that time, he gets right up on my face, and he's talking trash. And he goes, come on, white boy. He says, I want to see some of this speed, man. I want to see how fast you really are. And I was like, whoa, man, I was scared to death. Now he was just being fun and he wasn't being a jerk about it at all. He's a great guy and a really good corner, played a long time, but I was scared to death. Okay. So it was a run. So next play, next 3rd down, I come back out and this time I'm supposed to run a post corner. And right before we break the huddle, because we weren't in no huddle form yet, Jim goes, Beebe, if he's pressed on you, just go deep. I'm throwing it to you. And I was like, oh, my gosh, here we go, right? I'm running up the line of scrimmage, and I say, oh, God, just don't press me. Don't press me. I mean, I'm scared to death, guys. I'll be honest with you. And sure enough, Dishman comes up. He's still talking trash. He goes, come on, man, I want to see some of this stuff. Well, he did, and I beat him for a 63-yard touchdown. And so the first pass to ever go my way. What a way to break into the National Football League. I honestly can say this. When I'm running down the sideline, you watch, and I turn and look, it got lost in the dome lights because Jim used to throw a really high ball, like a punt, and it got lost in the dome lights. And I just kind of stuck my right hand out there and it just stuck there. If I do that same play, I'm telling you, I don't catch it 9 out of 10 times. But for this reason, I scored a touchdown. And the most funny part about the whole story was I get to the bench and I'm emotional. I know my family's watching this. I mean, what a way to break in. I can't even control the emotions going on. The next time on the field, so the next series, it's another run play. I'm running up the line of scrimmage, and Dishman gets up my face again like this, and he backs up about 8 steps. He said, dang, white boy can run. And then, for us playing each other, because we had many more games against each other, it was kind of a camaraderie. I mean, the NFL is just one big fraternity. We really are all kind of friends, and we just get along because we're all just playing a game we love to play.
Well, as a man of faith, there was divine intervention, right? You just stuck your hand up there, you made that catch, and that first catch of your career was for a touchdown. I mean, an incredible story. You went on, you wrote a book about it, 6 Rings from Nowhere, published back in 2012. What was the reception that you got from that book, and what made you, put that book together? Obviously, a great career and a great story. So, who came to you and said, "Hey, this would be great in a book"?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people that were close to me, obviously, and they're always going to say, of course, your mom's going to say, "Man, this should be a movie." I was like, yeah, "Okay, Ma." But then when I went to 4 with Buffalo, and then when I got to Green Bay and we won it, a lot of people, prominent people like the governor, just, GMs and coaches, they were saying, "Man, you need to write a story on this, man. This is a story made for a movie." I was like, okay. So we contacted some people, and in the first book, there was one book that was written, More Than a Ring, and it was by a company that went bankrupt, and it just kind of flopped, but the story was told. And then years later, some people wanted to actually do the movie. And I was like, my first call with these people, these producers, I was like, "Guys, I just want to throw this out there." I said, "If this has anything to do with you making money and me making money, and I really have no interest." I said, "But if this has everything to do with share the story that God gave me, I'm all in." I said, "But I want final say. I want final say what's said in this movie, because I've seen so many times that people," and I don't want to name other movies, but they didn't turn out so good for what they were, and they weren't factual and they weren't truthful. And I wanted, if we're going to do this, let's do it right. So people said, "Let's write the book first." So we did. We did 6 Rings from Nowhere. And it just shares my faith. The book is done very well. I still do book signings, and I'll go speaking engagements and sign some books, and a lot of them I just give them away too. But I still am working with the group in Nashville, believe this or not. Dan Merrill is a great guy. He's been trying to get funding. He has the rights to really produce the movie or a documentary, or now, they got all these series out now, doing something of an 8 series thing. So it still could come to fruition, to be honest with you, Mike. If it does, I just wanted to share the gospel. That's it.
Well, I'm sure it would have a lot of success, and again, great message with it all the way around with you. And again, impressed by what you've done since your playing days, as you said, a high school coach. And for high school, take us through this, because your brother was the athletic director at the high school. Your other brother was your defensive coordinator. How did that all work?
Yeah, well, it was. We have a very close family now, so I'm not going to go into the whole family thing, but we still take a family fishing trip with the 5 original kids and mom and dad. So the original 7, mom and dad are 85, 83, still alive, same house.
Wow.
The Beebe family now is 59. And everybody in that family lives within 20 minutes of each other, except my son and my daughter live in Nashville. Okay. They're the only ones. Everybody else, the other 56 or all 57 are still in this Aurora area. And this will be our 53rd year, and nobody's ever missed. Okay. Of taking this fishing trip. So that's the family that I come from. Quite unique. So, and after doing House of Speed for 6 years, I felt a calling to go coach and be on a personal level, more intimate level with young kids, and just help them out in their walk and whatever. And that's when I went to Aurora Christian. And I just felt a calling to go to Aurora Christian. They had, like I said earlier, no field, no weight room, 17 kids. What was I getting myself into, right? And I told those kids the first day, I said, outside of building your faith, we're going to win a state title. Nobody in Aurora history up until that time had ever won a state title. And Aurora is the second largest city in Illinois outside of Chicago, and there's 8 high schools. And I might have thought the impossible, but I've always thought the impossible. With God, there is no odds. And so I took the head job in 2004. My brother Dave, my youngest brother Dave, became the D coordinator. My other brother became the athletic director. My 2 sisters are my athletic director's assistants. So all 5 of the kids were in the same high school. It became Beebe University. So I had to get out of there. Okay. I'm kidding. But no, after doing 14 years, 10 as a head coach, I switched roles with my brother. He became the head coach and I became the offensive coordinator so I could go watch my son play at NIU. And then after that 4 years, I wanted to go see my son play when he started his career with the Minnesota Vikings. So I stepped down from the high school, took 18 off. And then in 19, I wanted to get back into coaching again. And that's when I took the job at AU.
Hey, you mentioned your son, Chad, a wide receiver with the Vikings.
Yeah.
It's got to be great to see a son play in the NFL, but the Vikings, as a former Packer, what was that like to go to Vikings games and root for the Vikings and your son?
Yeah, I had the trifecta. I grew up a Bear fan, went to
Yes.
the Packers, and then my son played for Vikings. Yeah, that was, you know what, blood is thicker. So I didn't have a hard time with it. Obviously, I'm going to root for my son, and if the Vikings aren't playing, I'm going to root for the Packers. But no, I mean, yeah, you know, my son's a whole nother story. You should have him on here, to be honest with you. You think my story's crazy? His is even crazier. You know, 11 of 12 years. Think about this for a second, Mike. Going back to his sophomore year in high school, he had 11 of 12 years we had reconstructive or season-ending injury.
Wow.
And he really landed up having an average high school career. I mean, it's a good high school career, but it was average because he was hurt every year. He never got to play a lot of reps in games. And then he goes to NIU because they saw him at a workout and they loved him. And he had really an average career at NIU because he was hurt every year. I mean, broken shoulder, I think he broke his collarbone 3 times. His ankles, knees, I mean, stuff like this. Yet he still goes to a workout for the Minnesota Vikings. It wasn't because I knew anybody. I didn't know anybody with the Minnesota Vikings. The strength and conditioning coach at NIU knew somebody at the Vikings and said, you need to get this guy into camp. And so they brought him into camp. And think about this odds. He goes in there as the 12th man. And who's he beat out? Laquan Treadwell. Laquan Treadwell is the greatest wide receiver. You could argue the greatest wide receiver in Illinois history out of Crete-Monee. Okay. And I know Illinois history. This guy was unbelievable. Goes to Southern Miss, breaks all the records of Southern Miss. You could argue the greatest wideout in Southern Miss history. First round pick of the Minnesota Vikings, and Chad beats him out. I mean, come on, man. I mean, that doesn't happen. So again, just against all the odds, never giving up, getting punched in the gut, getting kicked to the mat, get yourself up. Tomorrow's another day mentality. That's my son. And here he is still trying to work his way on another roster, was with the Vikings for 4 years, was with the Texans in camp this past year, and trying to hook up with another team in the NFL. So I don't think his story's done yet. I really don't.
Well, you're his dad, so you could see where he gets that from, and certainly great drive and great inspiration that you provided him. I'm sure that has kept him going strong. So we certainly wish him the best of luck in that. Again, as you said, right now, Aurora University, you're 31-7 your career record so far. You're doing some great things there. How can people follow you, see what you're doing, and follow your team as you move on here this year, getting ready for another year coming up? Sure.
The 2 best ways to see what we're doing is obviously the Aurora University football page. It's easy to find. DonBeebe.com is the best way to get stuff as far as me, where I'm speaking at, or books or something of that nature. So those are probably the 2 best avenues, Mike, to get in touch with me. And I love interacting with people. I really do. I think people are great. There's a lot of really good people out there, but there's a lot of hurting people out there too that just need a sense of hope. And if I can just do a small little thing of that, I would do that. I'm on Cameo. I send out a lot of cameos to people, just wishing them well, and hopefully they're getting better, going through cancer, or just other situations. So I use that as an avenue to help people out as well. So.
Well, that's great. I can see why you're a successful speaker, and again on Cameo and everywhere else. And I can't thank you enough for joining us, sharing your incredible story with us, and some of the, again, the folks that affected you, but then in the same way, people that you're certainly having a great impression on and helping them, and wish you nothing but the best moving forward.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Mike. And it was an honor to be on your show.
Well, great stuff there from Don Beebe. We thank him for spending some time with us, sharing his journey with us, that Leon Lett story in that moment, such a big moment, and affected so many people. We thank you for listening and watching to today's episode, and remind you to subscribe, as we'll have more great guests coming your way very soon. Again, we thank you for today. We'll see you next time for another edition of In the Front Row with Mike Vaccaro. Have a great day, everybody.